Welcome to another episode of the CarryTrainer Higher Line podcast. Hey guys, welcome to yet another episode of the Higher Line podcast. I've got a really cool one here today. I've got Mr. Stan Zuray. If you're a TV watcher, you might have remembered him from the show Yukon Men on Discovery Channel. And I discovered him. I was reading a book. It was his book, and I got about 2/3 of the way through the book, and Stan will have to forgive me because I didn't remember his full name, and I didn't know who the book was about. And finally, I'm like, who the hell is this guy? So I went and Googled, and I'm like, I saw the face, and I'm like, oh, it's that guy from the Yukon Men. It's an amazing book, which we'll talk some about those stories. So I reached out to him and found him up in the far north, and here we are. What is it, 7 o'clock up by you this morning?
Yeah, having my coffee to wake up.
6:45 by you. And what's the temp today?
It was 27 below. We got a little cold snap here, but we're actually a little warm because it's up north. It's been 40, 50, or 40, 45 below.
It was freezing here the other day. It was 13 below.
Mm-hmm.
Look at you, you're like, yeah, whatever. So you are in right now. You're in Tanana, right?
Yeah, right in a little village of under 175 people.
And so I don't want to make the podcast all about your show because people could watch that, but that's the town that life was filmed around in the show Yukon Men. Right?
Yeah. Yep. It was all done in here in Tanana, or the surrounding areas.
And that's the Yukon River that you're on.
Yeah, that's why they call it Yukon, Yukon Men. So
okay. So the book, your book, is your life story. Starts out. Now I'm starting to talk like you. I'm like stats out. It starts out with you as a kid in Boston area, right?
Yeah, it just starts out from the very beginning in the book, and it ends kind of when the show kind of started. They didn't go beyond that. I think one of the last scenes in the book is when I told my son, "Hey, somebody wants to film us," or something like that.
I remember that. How long ago did you write that?
Oh, that's not that many years ago, 3 years ago or something like that. And I didn't write it, it was, I had a lot to do with saying, yeah, this is correct. And, and all sorts of stuff like that, editing it. They'd send me pages of stuff and I'd look it over to make sure there's nothing, crazy on it. But yeah, it was this other fella, Tim Adderwell. He was for a while in the last years, just before the show ended here. He asked if he could write a book, if that'd be something I'd be interested in, and he did all the work, and
so he spent a lot of one-on-one time with you and thought, geez, I'd really like to tell Stan's story.
Yeah, we were one-on-one in that for about 2 years, he was one of the film guys who was here filming us. He's more of a producer type guy, and so he got to know me and hear a lot of stories and stuff like that, and actually be with me, and and actually those film guys, they were more a part of my day-to-day life than even my best friends, really, because my best friends, I don't spend, every hour of days with them.
Sure.
They're out doing their thing, I'm out doing my thing. But these film guys, they got to be with us all the time, And then after he left, he didn't really know while he was here if he was going to write the book or not. But when he left, then came the phone calls, and we'd talk a lot on the phone, and he'd go over stories, and he'd get in touch with friends of mine and all sorts of stuff like that. So
was he I know you said he was a film guy. Did he have writing experience? Because the book was very well written.
Yeah, he had done some plays and stuff, and he's kind of a science fiction type writer. He's got about 4 or 5 other books, and right now he's living in LA, and he's doing work helping other people write books. That's where how he makes his money, because writing a book is, it's kind of like being an artist in the city or something. You're not going to make very much money. And so he actually helps people write their books.
I see.
And that's how he makes, but he writes books, but they're pretty crazy books. He's got a real unique mind, and yeah, you'd have to read his books to find out. But so my book was really, our book was really the first kind of nonfiction book that he had written. But he also had written plays and stuff like that, and yeah, he had experience. I thought he was just another guy going to write a book about that wanted to write a book about me, that thought, because a lot of people would say, boy, you should write a book about your life, like a lot of people up here, people think that our lives are kind of unique a little bit, and so they, you hear that a lot. You should write a book, and I say, I'm not a writer. I don't have time, and so I just figured he may or he may not. And if he did write a book, sure, it'd be great something for my grandkids, and when I'm long gone, be something for them to, because so often we don't have things about our relatives that have passed on. So I thought, cool, and I didn't think didn't even think about like the quality and stuff of the book, but I was surprised, when it came out, and I'm not a good critique of writing, but it seemed like a lot of people really liked, that one of the most common comments is, boy, I couldn't put the book down. So he did a good job.
I actually listened to it on Audible. I'm in the car a lot, truck a lot, so I listen to it. I enjoy reading paper text, but I listen to it in I don't know, however long it is, 12 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is. I just kind of listened to it straight through. It was excellent. And that's why I said at some point, I'm like, who the heck is this guy? Like, how do I not know this person? And then I'm like, I do know who this guy is. I'm going to tell people a little bit, a couple of like the highlights that were in this book. So you're frontiersman, modern day frontiersman is how I think we'd put it. I did not know this about you till I read the book. You ran the Iditarod and placed in the top 10. You took 9th, right?
Yeah, I was rookie of the year for that year, and held that rookie of the year high, held that finish for like 10 years or something before.
The time?
Yeah, it was being 9th. Nobody had ever placed that high before as a rookie. Because usually there's about 50 people that run the race, and everybody else has run it before. And there's, say, 10 rookies every year. And so I placed 9th, and nobody had ever done that before. And I held that for like I held that for 10 years. And then finally a professional musher who had never raced the Iditarod, raced, and he came in like 8th or something. So, no, he came in 9th, and he tied.
Most people have no idea of how grueling that race is, because if we watch on TV, especially down here in the lower 48, you see clips, or maybe there's movies that talk about it, and you just see guys out riding sleds, and it's beautiful, picturesque. Talk a little bit about how grueling that couple weeks of your life was.
Well, the trail is there are places on the trail that tax you, like a lot of ice type stuff, and tight places, and where you're trying to maneuver that big team through and stuff. So it is taxing like that, but it's not so much that. It's the miles you're putting on the dogs every day. Like now they're doing like 100 miles a day or something like that, and we were doing like 75, which, in order to do that, you have to have those dogs really well fed. They have to be on, it's like, high test gasoline or something. They're really well fed.
How far is the race? How far start to
It's
finish?
1,000 miles. It's from like Anchorage, which is way down the south of Alaska, all the way to Nome, which is kind of not quite on the north coast, but it's up there. And
Okay.
so it's across the whole state. Go over 2 mountain
I
ranges.
I cut you off. You were talking about having to fuel the animals.
Oh yeah, so it's really, you know, it is taxing in that way. But what's the crazy part about the race really is, and we did it in 16 days. There was a lot of storms the year I ran it, but they're doing it in like 12 days and 11 days now. Because
Wow.
you have a really good trail and you're putting on 100 miles a day. You can do that, and then there's some mandatory breaks in there. But what's really grueling about it is the no sleep thing. You're going sometimes, like if you have any trouble at all, you're sometimes bypassing your sleep for like a day or two, and if you do get some sleep, it might only be a few hours, and I had a lot of problems like that. So when I ran it, by the end of the day, sometimes when you get sick, you get a flu or something like that, you'll notice like your cuts will start opening up all over your body, and if you bruise yourself, you bruise easy and stuff like that. Your body is starting to break down because you're not getting any sleep, and of course your mind's starting to go a little too. But you start hallucinating and stuff like that, and that's the hard part to me. That was the hard part, because I had done lots of bush stuff with my dogs, as opposed to like a lot of people train on nice trails and stuff like that for the race and stuff. But I had done a lot of snowshoeing behind my dogs and real deep snow and cold stuff. So that part really wasn't too bad. What was grueling to me, and you hear it from other people too, it's the no sleep. It just kills you. And of course when you don't get sleep, you get cold easy. And anyway, yeah, it was a different kind of race. There were no days on that race that were as hard as, say, the top 3 days out in the trap line every year of my life. But the sleep thing was something that I'd never put up with before.
How old were you? That was 1986, I think I read.
Yeah, so let's see, 86 would have been 35, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Yep.
So you had been running dogs for years before that and done some small races, but you never did anything remotely like a cross country like that.
No, the races that I had been in prior to that were like village races. I think maybe a couple of times I left this village and went to some other village and raced in some local fun thing with friends I knew. And I'd never raced before. As a matter of fact, I didn't know anything about the Iditarod. I remember the guy that was kind of sponsoring me, bringing me to other mushers that had raced the Iditarod before, just to talk to them. And I didn't have a clue. Even in the first days of the race, I remember tying my dogs up like I was on the trap line, and putting them on chains and stuff, and taking their harnesses off, and waking up the next morning and noticing that everybody's taking off real fast, and because everybody came in the dark, and I didn't see anybody how they hooked down for the first night, and so I look around, I see guys just jumping out of their sleeping bags and stuffing their sleeping bags in their sled and going to the back of the sled and just wrenching on the sled and saying, okay, come on, to the dogs, and the dogs all stand up, and they all get their harnesses on. They're all laying there in harnesses,
You've got yours all out of harnesses, chained up.
Yeah.
So you got an hour of work to do to get them all ready to go again.
And exactly. So I left the chains. That's the last time I saw all my chains for my dogs, or my gang line is what it was. But I just left it there and said, I guess this is the way you do things, So I didn't have a clue about anything, and but I knew dogs really well, and I know one of the things that I did that a lot of mushers didn't do in that, and it was this is kind of the early days of the Iditarod. I mean, it got so professional in the end. It was almost like Olympic quality racing, you know. It got so professional in the end that somebody like me probably couldn't have competed. You know, you would have needed a kennel of 50 dogs plus access to a lot more dogs, or a kennel of 100 dogs or more. And that's how the guys that are really running this race now, that's how they're winning, you know. But back in those days, you know, if you knew,
they're breeding these dogs like athletes are trained professional athletes.
Yeah, and they're running them. Yeah, you know, I basically had a trap line team, plus I picked up 7 more dogs around the village, some of which were almost like pets, you know, in somebody's yard, but they look good to me. You know?
Come on, you're going running.
No, I'm serious about that. That's
no, I'm saying like that's like hey man, can I borrow your dog for a couple of weeks? I'll try to bring him back alive.
I would literally do that, and then I'd start running them on the trap line, and I'd bring them back into town, and I'd either tell the person, yeah, I'd like to keep it for a little longer, and or I'd tell them, yeah, here it is back, you know, can't handle it, you know. And
but I also ran that. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I had 7 dogs before I started getting ready for the Iditarod. When my friend told me and usually people train for that race for like a year or more. They plan on it, and you know, or they've raced it before. And I had it was January. It was like the day before Christmas or something when I heard about it. When a pilot, this lady who was a pilot, she said her husband Mike. She said Mike wants to see you in 10. He wants you to run the Iditarod. He wants to put you in the Iditarod. And it was like January 6th or something like that before I made it back into 10, and I'd actually talked to him about the race. And I had like just months to get ready for it. And all I had to do during those months was haul all the freight that I'd normally be hauling in the springtime. I had to do that now. I didn't have time to really train for the race. My training was hauling freight out to my place on the Tozy, because the only time you have a chance to do that is in the spring when the trails get hard and the snow on the ground with the sled. Otherwise, you're cut off from town. You know, I'd never come into 10 during the summer. You know, so I had to get all that done, and that's how I trained for the race, and try to listen to people about how to run it and all that. Yeah.
People might hear 9th place and think like, big deal. That when I read that, I'm not an expert on it, but I've read enough and know enough about the Iditarod. That's kind of that's quite a feat. It's like against all odds. I'm sure a lot of people didn't even think that a guy, maybe people that knew you'd finish, but if people said, who's that? He's never run a race, they probably just thought, oh, he'll quit halfway through, or just didn't even think
Yeah, no, I thought, I remember being, I think it was about a third of the way through the race, and, you know, the dogs they were starting to look pretty beat up, and I just didn't know, I didn't see how I was going to even finish, you know. It was because it is like those guys that race that race that have been doing it for all those years, you know, those dogs are they're the toughest, fastest dogs, long distance dogs in the world, you know, and that's who you're racing against. You know, those are the best teams in the world, and yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, I didn't think I was going to even finish at times, you know. And then things just started looking up better.
That was 30 years ago ish. Do you still close your eyes and see yourself out on the trail? Do you still remember, like, you have vivid memories of that? Was it?
I mean, I got memories of it, but I think when you're talking about memories of the trail, yeah, I mean, I can still picture places in my mind, like, you know, places that were really tricky that, you know, I remember going down some of those creeks with branches sticking out on both sides of the creek, and you know, almost washing against the banks into those stumps sticking out, and you know, there were some tricky places, but there's been a lot of tricky places in my life that I mean, there's places I've almost died too, so
Sure.
those do stand out in my mind a little more. But
Let's talk a little bit. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's talk a little bit about how you got to Alaska. So you're going to go to jail, basically. You're a criminal. Your own words, not mine. You're a punk kid from Boston. You've got buddies doing drugs and fighting, and just, you said you want to get out. You're going to go to Alaska and make your way up in the bush. And I don't want to tell the whole story, but you and a young lady make your way up there. You had numerous trips back and forth, but finally you get back up there, and this is the Tozy you're talking about. You set up a homestead there, right?
Yeah. I mean, Boston was, like I say, punk kid. I mean, I wasn't no, 30-year-old experienced criminal. But I mean, we're just punk kid, and really didn't seem to. It was fun for a while, but then it seems like after a while, you just, you start getting older, and some of your friends some friends were, some friends were dying, some friends were, getting married, some friends were, it got to the point where I found myself often just wandering around the city, by myself. It was starting to get to be a real lonely existence, and I didn't seem to be fitting in. And so I just decided to leave. And it was a long experience, kind of leaving and finding my way to, the wilderness or something like that. And I did, after New Hampshire and a kind of a commune and the West Coast and numerous kind of similar situations, and up into, anyway, I finally found myself up into northern Canada, and would have probably stayed in Canada if I could have, but I couldn't become a citizen there or anything. They were basically, a lot of my friends were getting deported that I made friends with up in that northern wilderness area. And so I said, I'm going to go to Alaska. And by that point, I had kind of, prior to that, I really didn't have a concept for like any place other than the city. I knew the city really well, but I didn't really know like living in the woods. It's funny to think about now, but if you grow up in the country, you know about the woods, but like, vacant lots and a few little wilderness areas where you can see houses off in the distance. That's about all I knew of the wilderness, living in the city. So it takes a while to figure it all out. But by the time I got into Canada and met people up there that were kind of living away from the cities, I had the hang of it. And so when I came to Alaska, I just pretty much immediately ended up 40 miles being dropped off in the middle of the wilderness, 40 miles north of Tanana here. And Tanana just happened to be, this village here just happened to be the closest, village or people, post office, to me out there in the wilderness. And so when winter came, we snowshoed and had 3 dogs or something. Then let's see, I think I had 4 dogs. Me and my ex-wife and 4 dogs headed on into Tanana to.
This is like the early 70s?
Yeah, this is 1973.
Okay.
1973 and 74.
So you've been up there living this life, longer than I've been alive. You could be my father, Stan.
Well, I'm 70. Let's see. Last night, my wife asked me how old I was, and I had to think about it. And I said, I'll be 71. Actually, not too long, like a week or two like that. 71.
When's your birthday?
February 23rd.
Write that down.
So let's see. Yeah, that's about 10, 13, 10, 12 days, 14 days, whatever that is. Yeah. So
you and your ex, you get this up on the Tozy River. What's the full pronunciation of the river?
It's the Tozitna.
Tozitna. So you
Tozitna.
guys get this property up there, you homestead, which is cool that we still can do that. I don't know if we still
put
can.
Back there for a 1-year period. I just happened to show up at the state at just the perfect time. They just opened up the Homestead Act, which it's the same act that the federal government used to open up even in the Midwest, I think, and so it had been shut down and not functioning for a time, but they just happened to open it, and they let it run for about a year and a half like that. And a number of people went out to these areas that were open and staked a little bit of land. And the state up here, Alaska, the state still does things like that. They still have these land sales. It's not a Homestead Act, but it is a remote parcel type thing that they still do. It's a little different, but yeah.
Just some context for our younger viewers and listeners. At that time, early 70s, Alaska had only been a state for like 20 years. So, and I'm not telling this to you, but the folks listening, like, that's how much our earth has changed. Just 20 years before you getting there, it wasn't even a state yet. That's back then, the pipeline, when I landed in 73, that was 1 year prior to the pipeline starting to be the Alaska pipeline being put in, and a year later, I mean, just that change alone, what it did to the cities with the influx of people and workers and the and just in the villages, a lot of people, they left the villages and went to work up there. I have a lot of friends in the village here that my age that went to work back then in those days and made a lot of money, and being young, they blew it all, of course, in the cities, sure.
But, when they came off the pipeline, but and that was a massive change. The pipeline really changed things here. But a lot of people like me just never went to work. I never wanted to go to. I didn't leave Boston to come up here to work. I left Boston to get away from all that stuff. So while it was going on, I just lived for like 11 years out in the woods, and I would come in the wintertime, maybe once a month for a little while. And then come spring, I'd do all this hauling of stuff to to my place out there, the Tozitna. I'd haul, just dog sled load after dog sled load and come in every 2 weeks or something like that. And then
just stuff that you needed to provision yourself for the future until when the snow was gone. Food and whatever food, other stuff.
Yeah, junk from the dump, like I remember I'd haul engines out there and all sorts of stuff, any kind of
metal. What the hell were you doing with engines?
Oh, just making things, I'm just kind of somebody who will find an old engine laying in the bushes and I'll bring it out there. Next thing you know, it'll be turning a car alternator to produce some juice for some battery that runs a light. And I'd always be doing stuff like that, or making, you always need metal, so I'd just be hauling that and some food, and some gas, you need some gas to run your chainsaws. I could probably, back then, I could probably live off of 25 gallons of gas a year, stuff like that.
It's an interesting, you can't relate to like the modern life down here because you have never when you left the lower 48, and of course all about technology because we're using it now to communicate, but you're Peter Pan, man. You left the nonsense and just went and were not to insult you and say a boy, but you like did what boys want to do. You want to play in the woods your whole life.
Yeah, I did. I don't. I mean, I know the city. I know how to get around in the city, and because I did leave there prior to being, like 19, 20, and but I was never, and of course I saw my parents and stuff like that, working in the city and all that. But, yeah, I never lived a life where I had, you know, I never had a family and had all the trouble of trying to make ends meet and all that, I just, yeah, I left and, yeah, I left it. But, I used to work real hard. I mean, when I used to change tires. That's what I used to do for a living and do some minor, brake work and stuff on cars in a garage. That's what I did for a living, so worked real hard doing that. Um, but, and did that right up, even when I went back to Boston after living in the Canadian woods. I went back to Boston for like a half a year, and I got my job back changing tires and grub staked myself, and bought a car and rebuilt
And
it.
tell the youngsters what grub stake means. I know what it means.
Oh yeah, it just means get up enough money to go do what you want to do, and like I say, you at that I hitchhiked to Boston from Canada, and had a wild dog with me too, and a pack on it, and that's how I came out of the Canadian wilderness, with a pack dog, and we just hiked across, hitchhiked across country, but when I met my ex-wife, and we had more stuff, and so when we headed to Alaska, yeah, I went back to Boston for my brother's wedding. He said, before you go to Alaska, you got to come back. I'm getting married. And so I went back to Boston for my brother's wedding. And, but then I bought a car and headed up to Alaska here, and with a car, and sold the car in Fairbanks, 150 air miles away from this village. And, 9 days after I crossed the border, I was in a plane, had sold my car, had everything loaded in the plane. I was being dropped off 40 miles north of here. So I knew exactly what I wanted back by then. When I hit Fairbanks coming from Boston that last time, I knew exactly what I wanted. I wanted to drive to the end of a long dirt road, leave the car, and just start hiking all my stuff out into the woods or whatever. And when I got here, people explained to me that you don't do that kind of thing. If you want to get out in the bush, you take a bush plane. You just rent a bush plane. There's bush planes. Everybody flies bush planes up here. People go trapping in the winter. They get dropped off by a bush plane and stuff like that. So that's what we ended up doing. And yeah, lived out there for 11 years, got to know the people in Tanana because I'd come in every winter, and then I started kind of like half living out there and half living in the village here. Had a place in the village, and just kind of back and forth, and would my home out there became the last cabin on my trap line. Is what happened, and just started.
Is the home still standing out there?
Oh yeah, and I haven't been out there this winter yet. Usually I go out there around now. We'll break trail out there, and this year we haven't been trapping out there because as you may know, or trapping is kind of like trapping's basically it seems like it's not going to be an option here. It isn't an option this winter. There's almost nobody trapping in the village. The anti-trapping forces have pretty much ruined the market, and about 2 years ago,
fur is murder.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's there's just no.
I really want a beautiful fur hat. I've got like a cheap one, that come from a department store, but I want like a legit fur hat.
Yeah,
maybe you can help me with that.
I do have. I mean, I have a nice fur hat now, but I remember for many years not having any fur I caught. I would sell because it was, you need the money. You needed some money, and I one day I realized, like, some of the main trappers in town, a lot of them, they were wearing those store-bought hats you're talking about, those cheap, $25 fur hats, and
yeah.
the catching all this beautiful fur, and they're selling all this beautiful fur every year, but the hat that they're wearing and stuff like that is just this junky thing, because they were so cheap, and they're actually warm. They didn't last a lot, but a long time, but they were, yeah, and everybody's wearing those things, including me, and
Gotta
it's kind of
sell the
funny.
real stuff.
Sell the real stuff. But this year it's like I have a few traps out, caught a couple of lynx and a few things, but I don't want to put out any marten traps because they're going for, well, I heard that Russian sable went for $25 a marten at the last auction, and so that means Alaska marten, which is the second best sable in the world, Alaska interior marten. They'll probably be going for 18 or something like that, unless you can find, there's some outfits doing like subsidizing fur. They're giving trappers like more than the fur's worth just to help them out. There's some of that going on, but you gotta be in the right place to do that.
And for folks listening, a marten is related to like a mink, right? Mm-hmm. But it's larger. It's a predatory animal. Yeah. Beautiful animal.
Long, narrow. They have fluffier fur than a mink, but
looks kind of like an otter.
Yep.
Right.
Small. Yep.
Yeah. Beautiful animals.
And that's been like the bread and butter of trapping up here. It's, you still go get a wolf or something like that, for your ruffs and stuff, for your parkas, and I still do that for the family. I put ruffs on, people's parkas and stuff, but as far as making a living off of it, it's over with. It's not worth the gas for somebody to go out there and check their trap line with their snow machine.
So talk about that a little bit, like in your book, you talk about things that are pretty harsh for somebody that grows up. I grew up on a kind of a hobby farm, so we slaughtered animals, and I hunted my whole life. I still do, so I kind of understand the nature of things. But you hear people talking about trapping a wolf, and they're like, "Well, why do you got to kill a wolf?" Just talk a little bit, not about why you have to, but like, does it decimate the population that all of you folks are out trapping marten? And I think I know the answer, but I just want talk about that with the listeners a little bit.
You mean like why it's necessary, or?
Sure, why it's necessary, why it's maybe not what people might think, not just the economics of it, but just the nature of the ecosystem.
Well, it's, if you're living in a place like Tanna here, no matter how, like my wife, she's a pure Alaska native, and she has lived and grew up in this lifestyle. Even, she comes from a time when, there wasn't very much assistance from anybody. You had to make it or break it, and she grew up in that, and she doesn't like to, see moose killed or animals, whatever. But like if we have a wolf or something like that, I'll bring it in the house and skin it. What am I going to do? Warm up a building, another building just to skin I skin all my marten in the house here, and she keeps the house real nice, but it's perfectly acceptable to do that. And and that fur is for mitts and for selling and for ruffs, and all and animals are to be eaten, and it's just part of life up here. And I just don't. A lot of people don't understand that. Those animals, that's a renewable resource, and the pain that animal suffers through what I do to it when I kill it is way less than the pain that animal is probably going to go through dying a natural death, because there's nothing nice about when an animal gets old in the woods. And so, that doesn't maybe, I don't
You're
know.
talking about
It's just a
eventually
perspective.
and I think what people don't get, like down by me here, I've got numerous memories of old whitetail while I'm up in a tree stand watching like an old whitetail get thrashed by coyotes. And
Mhm.
that's what happens. They don't
That's
just
what
go lay
happened.
down in the woods and leaves cover them up and they die like grandma does in the hospital on morphine. They end up, once they're too slow,
Yeah.
either
Mhm.
disease takes them and they die, and then everything comes and picks them to shreds, or a predator catches them and rips them apart and
Yeah,
has
so I mean,
supper.
it's just life. Like it's just life is cruel, and as you get further and further away from, you take a animal or a person further and further away from nature, they're more insulated from that kind of, you know, that kind of thing. But when you live here and you're living in the, not so much anymore, but especially when I was living, in the my earlier years and stuff, I mean, I'm pretty set up now. I'm older. I have 45 years of accumulated junk to, take care of myself, and and I got a lot of the things that I need, and life is just easier, um and so, you know but but we still eat moose meat, and we still
Sure.
fish, and we still, kill thousands of fish a year, and um, people just don't, people don't realize how their lives in the city is is doing the same thing I'm doing. They're just, they're
Paying somebody else to do the killing.
they are, or they're the clothes they wear. What's it all made out of? You know, petroleum products. And then they're crying about, climate change and CO2, and look at the lives they're living. And I'm not complaining. My family that lives like that back in Boston, I'm not complaining about them. I'm just trying to, uh, you know, sh- uh, sometimes you just want to try to make them understand that, take care of, if you want to do something about the environment and stuff, take care of your own business first. I can have all sorts of compassion or understanding for some guy that rides a bicycle, lives in a tiny apartment in the middle of the city, and says we shouldn't, try to, burn whole bunches of fossil fuel and kill animals, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't think killing animals is necessarily, I don't like killing animals, and nothing I like about it. I don't get no kick out of it at all. I wouldn't
Sure.
even hunt. I would not. I'm not a sport anything. I wouldn't do anything like that, if it wasn't for the fact that I needed the meat and stuff. And I could understand somebody in the city saying they're, a vegetarian, if they and they I can have all sorts of respect for that kind of person, if they're, like I say, riding a bicycle and living in a small apartment that's reasonable for the amount of oil they have to burn to heat that apartment and all that. But, you know, um, these people nowadays that they don't want us up here trapping and stuff like that. They don't want us killing moose. They don't want us fishing, and stuff like
Who's
that.
they? Who's they, do you think? I mean, just
Well, I think it's the anti. Well, we know who it is. I mean, it's, people like Peter and stuff like that. I mean, right now I heard they're buying up stock in clothing companies so they can, force, you know, the clothing companies to not have anything to do with fur products. It's just their latest technique. And then the anti. Um, they make it seem like, killing anything is terrible, but these same people are living their lives. Take care of your own life, look at what,
I
and
wanna inject something just because I think I understand what you're saying. It might not even be, they could be vegetarians. They could be not using anything in their life that's related to animal products. I've got a loved one, excuse me, who's very concerned with reducing fossil fuel emissions. And this person spends a lot of energy working on educating people on solar and wind and things like that, alternative energy sources. And I used to be involved in that some, so I have a rudimentary understanding of it. But the same person has flown in jet airplanes to 50 countries, 100 countries, something like that, has like literally jet sets traveling all over the world. It's like, well, wait a minute, if you like care about this broad thing of the planet, every time you get in that plane, you're burning barrels of fuel, which, and we could just have that whole conversation about the cascade of events that happen. But yeah, I think it's hypocrisy is kind of what you're saying. Don't tell me what to do if you can't live it yourself.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's I up at a fish camp, which is 40 miles upriver from here. It's off the grid. That's where I spend every summer.
You're basically a rich man. You have 3 houses, maybe
Oh,
more.
God.
You've got the Tozy house. You've got fish camp. You've got your townhouse. You've got sled dogs. You've got snow machines.
Mm-hmm.
You ride around in freaking air
20 snow machines, probably 30 chainsaws.
Yeah, you're
20.
Geez,
Yeah, only two of them run. But no,
the rest of them are for parts.
Yeah, for parts. I have, and the same with chainsaws. It's unbelievable, all the engines, because it's from Boston. From being around engines and cars and hot rods and stuff in Boston. I'm just really into mechanical stuff. But like up at fish camp, I use we have a small creek that runs right next to our fish camp. I got a water turbine thing, and it produces all the energy in fish camp. I don't burn kerosene in my lanterns anymore up at fish camp. At night I got this little turbine thing, and it produces 300 watts of electricity, continuous, and we
That's
charge
cool.
all our, we use it for all sorts of things, and because you always have like rechargeable batteries and different stuff like that. So I've used that. I've had a wind turbine thing, a propeller thing up in a tree one time out in the Tozy when I used to live out there in the early years, and charged a little battery and kept the CB radio running so we could talk to somebody up in the hills, and outside of Tana here. And I've had I'm not I like that kind of stuff. It's if it works, if it works for your life, but a lot of times that kind of stuff is pretty expensive too. I never could have afforded. I found that generator thing, but like to have a huge solar array to have
it's all big bucks. And those batteries are taxing on the environment to create, and it's who's digging that shit out of the ground in the countries that they're mining the components from, that they're making the batteries. I think it's people forget about these batteries and all that stuff doesn't just come from nowhere.
And I don't think like you said, who's putting an end to trapping and hunting and fishing and stuff like that. A lot of times it's big money. I mean, that's what it is. It's big money. People are making a living off of running these organizations, and they're living pretty good. The people on top are living pretty darn good on these outfits, and they're living off of people's sympathy. But the problem is what they're doing to the people, like say out here in the villages and stuff like that. I mean, all my kids, even the girls, they all were raised with a little trap line close to the house here. Just when just walking a half a mile was, when they were really small, and coming back with a martin and stuff like that. And that would be how every one of my kids would buy their Christmas presents every year for, their mom and me and their brothers and sisters. That was all done with trapping money. And that's how kids in this village, that's the first money that all the kids in the village would make, back in the, not anymore, But yeah, you'd get 30, 40, $50 for a Martin back in the 70s and stuff like that. And, that's what you would start making money with. And then the older people would have longer trap lines, and it was something that young people could start out. It was the first money they saw, and they used to be, yep, that's the way it was. And it's just sad to see that go, just because people that are really not being environmentally conscious, are destroying that, and it's just sad to see that, like I say, I'm not complaining about anybody in the city living like that. I'm complaining about people who are destroying our life and complaining about our life, living like that. That's what
It's infuriating, actually.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have a, I completely understand. Like, I work avidly in the Second Amendment community, trying to protect and educate people on protect the Second Amendment and educate people on it. And I think people that just don't like a certain thing, maybe don't understand the totality of it, and can work very hard to make huge changes to culture and to life, and don't really understand the ramifications. I don't care about guns. I've never had any use for them as such. You don't need them either. Or fur's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Live like I do. I think there's got to be some lines there. Like, if somebody thought being a pedophile was okay. I mean, yeah, there are certain things that we have to say are not okay, but yeah, life's changed there. Like, you guys have a road to town now that was never there. So to, like, after the show came, do you have people just like drive up there like, I'm a big fan of the show, I'm going to drive around town? I mean, it's not like.
Yeah. Well, the road right now is no, the road has been snowed in and unusable since the ice started flowing down the river in November. So it hasn't even been open. It's some people coming over it on snow go, but you can't even come over it in snow go because there's a lot of windblown places on it. So they come overland on the old traditional trail. But pretty soon here, another 20 days maybe, it might open, and it'll open for till maybe mid-April, and then it'll start going to heck again. The river will start melting, and the river ice will start getting dangerous, so you won't be able to cross the river. And then it'll be open off and on for a little bit of the summer, but you won't be able to drive into town. You'll only be able to drive to the Yukon River on the other side, 6 miles.
So there's no bridge.
There's no bridge, and so you rely on that river, and like I say, it's closed more than it is open. And even when it does open here for driving into the village, it's only going to be for like 2 months or something at best. And it's mostly just people in town here that use it. There's very few people that just drive it, although some people do. We've actually had a couple of tourists come, but it's it's not like the Hall Road that goes up north to the, where all the oil fields are. That's open all. This is a primitive road.
Did you residents want the road? The folks in Canada?
About half of them did, but it's been in the works. The state has been talking about that for like 30 years. It's a proposed road. They wanted to build it for a long time, and eventually it will continue on. There's minerals and stuff up north of here, and eventually state gets some more money, they'll open up more. But a bridge is a long ways off. That's like I don't know how much that would cost. That's a huge expense, way more than the road. So
let's talk a little bit about so you leave home, you've spent the bulk of your life in the woods. I'm assuming you don't go home often to the lower 48 to Boston. So you've most of your family's missed your life. You've missed theirs. Did you get like letters from home? What the heck's going on? Why are you up in the woods? Don't you love us anymore?
Let's see. My mother, when is this? I'll never forget it. But and I've mentioned this before. Whenever this is talked about, but when I left Boston, my mother told me. She said, as long, just go and if I never see you again, as long as I know you're okay, I'll be happy. So don't ever worry about coming back, and just go and be. And that kind of attitude was because by the time I left Boston, she understood. She understood me. I mean, when I was a kid, my father was more like strict and quiet and never really, we never really had long discussions. They were usually short, where he would tell me his opinion, or he would tell me, what I was to do or not to do. He's a very good father, no problem there. But my mother, she liked to talk a lot, and I remember, being pretty messed up kid and sitting at night with her when I'd come in, uh, especially in the end, come in from like being out all night, in the city or something like that, and we'd just sit at the kitchen table and talk. And she understood what I was going through in life, and my father probably did too, but we just didn't talk about it as much. And so, yeah, when I finally told them, uh, that I was, well, I guess it would be like that I'm quitting my job at the tire company. I'm quitting my, I was going to college, a little bit, and trying to do that. And I told her I was going to quit all that, and I was heading to a hippie commune in New Hampshire. There was some little farm type thing up there. I was just going to move up there. I mean, they didn't try to talk me out of it because they knew where I was headed. They knew that I was just headed for trouble. I'd been in a lot of, punk type trouble. It wasn't, like I said, a lot of my older friends were starting to get into, some serious stuff, and you're treated a lot differently by the courts if you're, 20 to 30 as opposed to like 10 to 18. I mean,
Sure.
it's just a whole nother world. And she knew where I was headed. And so yeah, she was just happy to see me, especially when I went to Alaska, because she knew what I had found. They knew kind of what I had found in Canada, and they and saw changes in me and stuff like that. And so when I was headed to Alaska, they were, if we don't ever see you again, um, as long as we know you're okay, it's all good. So,
Did your parents ever come to visit you
yeah,
on the Tozy? Yeah.
they never to the Tozy, but they did. Actually, they did go there with me one time. There, it was this crazy thing where they came to Tana to see me because I had moved back in those first 11 years out in the woods. They never came to. I never saw them, but we kept in touch through the mail and stuff like that. But then, we were in Tana one time when they came to Tana, and there just so happened to be a friend that was doing some contracting. He had a helicopter, and he actually flew them and me out to the Tozy. They saw the place for an hour where I used to live out there, and then flew us back into Tana here. He just did it as a favor because he knew my parents were in town. So
That's pretty neat.
that was pretty cool. That was for them to have seen that, because we don't usually have helicopters available to us at all. So,
do you look back on those times and regret or lament missing time with family at all? Was it an equitable trade for you? Would you have changed that?
no, I mean, it because they were doing okay too. And, I mean, I was older. I would have had my own life anyway in the city. And, I mean, my brother, he stayed in the city, and they eventually walked him to the airport and made sure he got on the plane. They sent him up here to to me, to take care of, because he was kind of getting into trouble too.
How old was he when he came up?
Oh, he was older. He was, let's see, that probably was he was probably like 40 years of age or something like
Okay.
that, And
How long did he stay?
He stayed up here for 10 years,
Okay.
He stayed up here for 10 years in the village, and they got him out of there, and because he grew up in the same generation as I did, and he was kind of involved in a lot of the stuff that I was, and but he stayed there and worked as a maintenance guy for hotels and stuff like that. He had a regular life, married. But yeah.
How about this? Perseverance furthers.
hmm I say
Talk
that.
about that.
I say,
Yeah. So
yeah.
that's
My son has gotten it. It's just, I don't know how many times in the last, even the last couple of weeks that we've said that, just we kind of jokingly say it to each other, because we'll be working on something, and it gets like too much, it's like, this isn't working, and we just keep trying different things, and finally something happens and it works, and we just look at each other and go, perseverance furthers, because
Where
it got
did you
put in the book,
where'd you pick that up? That's kind of an old Zen Buddhist thing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's perseverance furthers. I think that's it is.
Something you picked up in that commune.
Oh yeah, maybe
Walking around naked, painting.
yeah, yeah. It might be a
Think-
Confucius saying. Is it Confucius?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Anyway, that's what it is. It's one of those sayings, and I just it's just always been in my mind since those hippie days.
So
But
it's like a reset for you if you're facing some adversity, working on a project, or in your book, freezing to death out in the cold.
Yep. Yeah. You just got to keep going, because what's the alternative? The alternative is to just give up. And I mean, it's not that I never give up on things. I mean, any reasonable man will give up eventually.
What makes Stan give up?
Oh, I
And just to clarify this, give up. I'm working on an engine. I can't figure it out. Leaving it to come back tomorrow with a fresh head. That's not giving up.
Yeah.
But like,
yeah. Okay. Because I do that all the time. There's lots. I always tell my son, 50% of what you want to do in life, your dreams. Just don't worry about the fact that you didn't get your new cabin started this past year. Don't worry about it. I mean, don't kill yourself over it. I mean, the fact that you can't do 50% of the things you want every year after year after year, that's normal. A person that has dreams, is gonna that's just the way it's going to be. If you don't have any dreams, you're going to succeed in everything you want to do. And
Sure.
But that's not good either. So
aim low.
That's different than that's different than giving up. You just got to know where to I don't know. You just gotta, it's there's a saying in life, there's no such thing as absolutes. You can't say don't ever give up, don't perseverance furthers, but that's not an absolute either. I mean, that's not always true.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
What's something, or what, if you can even quantify it, are you most proud of in your life? Because it
Uh,
could be anything. It could be like, something 100 years ago or something this morning.
well, I get, it'd be probably my family, my kids. Even though sometimes they get in, they have troubles, just like anybody else. But I mean, it's family. I mean, they always say family comes first. Or it's out of everything you've done in life, people will always say, or a lot of times people will say, that's the one thing they wouldn't trade for anything. I mean, I would probably trade anything I've done in life. I did or all these cool things, or being on TV, or having built this something or other, or yeah, I'd trade any of those things. Have no value that would compare to um my kids, my family.
I
So
like that.
yeah.
I
So
like that.
but there's other cool things I've done. Like I did ride's one of them. That's one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life. Um you know
Tell
uh,
us something that nobody knows about you.
mm, mm, um yeah, I won't tell you that. No,
Come on.
I think of something. I think
You
of some
can't, you
things
can't.
back in Boston.
Oh, it doesn't
Yeah,
matter. Yeah, it was just, tell us something that, I mean, maybe it does. It's not that it has to be a secret, but just something nobody knows about you because nobody ever asked.
yeah.
I mean, it could be that you wear ladies' underwear when nobody's looking. It could be,
um, yeah. After being on the Yukon Men show for, um, all
7 years you were
those
on there, seven
years, 7
seasons.
seasons, 6 years, uh, there's not too much I haven't told anybody.
Oh, there's
Yeah,
got to be one secret
yeah,
lingering
yeah,
in that brain of
yeah.
yours.
Yeah, I remember the president of the film country company one time was up here, and he was just a regular guy. It was a small company, and he good friend of mine, and he asked me, tell me some you know uh, life threatening stories, and so I started telling him, all these things, he had never heard, about the time I almost drowned, the time I almost froze, the time I almost, and after a while, I'd finish one, and then he'd want another one, and finally, uh, I said, you want to hear any more life-threatening adventures, and he said something like, I think I've heard enough. I think I got enough to last for many episodes here, and we both laughed, and so I don't know. I've told just about everything, I think.
How did it
I
feel? So you spent your whole life, I don't want to, off the beaten path, not your whole life, but the better part of your life off the beaten path, away from uh, the hustle and bustle of society. How did it feel when all of a sudden you're asked to be part of a TV program where now your whole life is not your whole life, but whatever you decide to show is broadcast to the world, where you live, how you live,
Mhm.
what, how was that's a pretty big swing from one side to the other.
Yeah, that was. When I was a kid, I was always I think I was really shy. I mean, I remember being young and cons- being called, don't be so vague. People had asked me a question and I would not answer it. It would be, or I'd answer it in a real vague way. I remember people talking to me like that. So I was pretty, um, yeah, the show is it's funny how, but and I remember times when I wouldn't speak up, like even when yeah, it's just that, but I have changed a lot in that way. I feel maybe it's confidence. Maybe what I've done in life has given me a certain confidence, and so yeah, I can talk real freely about there's some things in life I probably would certainly over something like this that I would not talk about. I mean, there's certain things that I was involved in the city, and maybe just involved with, not necessarily something that I initiated or something like that. But there are things that I wouldn't talk about to almost even a good friend, and
Sure.
certainly not over something like that. So there are things like that in my life, but everything else, I just is to me an open book. I try to be, you know, respectful, even when I don't, or I try not to offend, people to some extent too. So I do hold back, there's certain, but I don't know where I'm going here, but
I'm tracking. Your son, Joe, was that his
yeah,
name?
yeah,
Was a big character in
yeah, he
the
was.
show as far as the viewers. Does he still live up by you? How many
He
of your
does.
kids stayed in town?
Yeah, no, we were hauling logs out of the woods today, and and me and him, and he lives in town. He's the only. I have three daughters. One that's up in the slope, one that's in Fairbanks, and then one that's living back east uh, right now. And then Joe, he still lives in town here. He has lived other places. I mean, he's gotten out of the village. He's well versed. He's worked up in the North Slope. He's been around, but he prefers. He's got a lot of my blood in his veins. He doesn't like to work, you know. And
Now, I need to make sure people understand you guys work your ass off. He doesn't want to toe somebody else's line, or he wants to work on his own terms.
right, yeah, he doesn't want to. Even in town here, he doesn't really want to work for the city or the tribal council that much. He wants to do his own thing, and he would prefer to make next to nothing trying to haul firewood to make a few bucks to get by, rather than some good money, at a steadier job, and that's just the way he lives. He's married, he's running a household, he's got a small dog team, uh, you know, you know, trapping, and he's a really good hunter. He does some guiding, big game guiding, to make. That's what he likes to do. He likes to go out and work with, some of the guides in the area, and be like an assistant guide, and
Just because
and
he knows the ground so well up there, probably.
he's really a good hunter. He grew up in that. I got pictures of him. He's just a tiny little kid with a gun and sitting over a bear that he shot because he was the only male in camp that his mother was there and sisters were there, and he ran out and shot a bear. And so he had a tiny when he's just little, and he's been around that kind of stuff all his life. So he's really a good hunter. He's way better than I am, even because of just the way he grew up, and it just his mind just came into he's a lot
I
different
think
than
it's pretty cool that you get to. I'm a dad. My son's in his 20s now. It's pretty cool that you get to have that kind of a day-to-day connection. And I'm sure, like all fathers and sons, you guys butt heads about things, but to be able just to spend that kind of time together, that's pretty magical. Out hauling
yeah.
wood and
Yep, yep. No, we spent a lot of my kids too, my daughters, and like they would go with me to fish camp sometimes, and a lot of times my wife, she's had a kind of a half steady job in town, with working for the tribal council in town, and doing these working on the fish and environmental type stuff, and in town. And so there was a lot of years when, I was, younger, and the kids were young. And even when they were preschool, very young, like I'd bring my daughters out in the dog sled with me and go out for like 7-day periods out on the trap line, way out, way like 65 miles out of town here. Take me many days to go check my traps and stuff like that as a young guy. And back in those days, we had no satellite phones, no nothing. If anything had ever happened to me, the kid would have froze to death. I got pictures of us, me driving with my load and the kid sitting on top of the load all bundled up and stuff, and with a baby bottle. I remember one time I caught a martin at a trap. I got this picture of the kid with his head sticking out, and I'd keep the baby bottles down, next to their body, for the day, and I'd stick the baby bottle in their mouth, and I propped it up with a frozen dead martin, to keep it at the right level, And I remember, I had a little one of those old-fashioned cameras back then. I remember taking a picture of that, and I still have that picture. But that's the way those kids were, and my daughters too. They. I remember my son, one of his earliest memories was being all covered up in the sled, and he didn't know. And of course, they'd always be trying to stick their head out, and I'd say, get under there, because it'd be really cold, so you'd keep them, but even their head down in there. And I remember one time Joe said he was sneaking looks, he had the side of the sleeping bag open, and he was just looking as we're driving. And he remembers like 4 wolves just running beside us, as we're driving down the trail with the dogs. And they were just kind of scoping us out, running beside us. They weren't coming in on us or anything like that. It was just, I spooked them, and they ran beside us for a little bit. And that's one of his early.
That's cool
memories. That is cool. But that's the way it was, And I remember always saying when I was young that, well, actually, I remember when I was young, always wishing that my dad could be around more, and as I got older, I remember, because he was always working, it wasn't like he could work 8 hours a day and that was enough. He had to work on the weekends at the tire shop, and he worked as a blacksmith in the fire department, for a day job. And then he'd sometimes work at, beyond that, sometimes do some of his sleeping at this cab dispatch thing in the middle of the night, and try to get rest, So, I mean, there was a lot of time he wasn't there, and just trying to, make money for the family. And so I remember, thinking as I got older, wouldn't it be cool if you could be like on a farm and have your kids work with you, that kind of thing. And in a way, that's what I've done here. I've been able to, what I do, like going to fish camp and fishing all summer. And then some of my trapping, especially when it was early, once the kids got to be, 12 or something like that, that was it. They never wanted to have anything to do with me anymore. They're starting to become teenagers and didn't want to go to fish camp. They want to hang out in the village with their friends, but we would still go to fish camp, so they had to go to fish camp. And the trap line, they never wanted to go out in the trap line much with me in those days either, and my son, he, even my son, as much as he liked getting out in the woods, he liked taking his fast snow machine out in the woods and going moose hunting or caribou hunting in the hills with his fast machine and all that. And it's funny, he never wanted anything to do with dogs, because they grew up around dogs when they were young. They remember hour after hour after hour being bundled up in that sled, sticking their head out and saying they were so confined that they were watching TV, I remember one time they were so delirious from being under all those covers, with sensory deprivation for so long. They said, "Yeah, I was watching TV," under there. It's just like, my God, yeah, what I put them through, but yeah, trying to keep them alive in the cold, and but now that's what he's doing. He's got an old junky machine, doesn't care about fast machines anymore. He just wants a machine that he can go off in the woods. Got some old Yamaha Bravo, that all beat up, and he's got 8 dogs and a dog sled, and so he's just now he's like coming back to the way he was, the way he got brought up when he was really young.
Did being on that show change a lot for you guys? For a young, was he in his early 20s, late teens when that started?
He was. He kind of like grew. He went from like, maybe not teenager, but I forget how old he was when that started. But he was just what he,
A young
it was
man.
like he went from young man, teenager to still a young man, but he's just ended a few years ago, and he became a mature young man during that show, and so it was different. His experience was different than mine, and he was going through big changes in life, in that sense, where I wasn't. I was firmly a mature adult, and pretty much had my my running shoes on, or whatever you call it,
Sure.
and when it came about, but it was, it didn't, it was, if I had lived, every time I go to the city, like Fairbanks or something like that, or even Boston. I mean, during that show years, my parents were, getting very old, and they eventually died, and so, I would be going out like, there was a period there where I was going out every year because, my parents were getting really old. And so, when I would go out there, I would always, just what would happen, because I was involved in the show, you'd get stopped so much by people, and it'd say, "You're Stan from Yukon Man," and shake my hand and all that. And you couldn't go in a store without having, the people in the store announce that you're, you know, to all the workers, all the workers come up to you, and there were stores. Yeah, I remember going into stores to look at something, to some electronic stores or something like that, and you walk out, and you weren't able to look at anything because you were meeting so many people. And I remember saying, though, that when I come back to the village, like, if I had lived out in the city during that time, it probably would have changed my life incredibly. But it was, I very rarely would go out to the city, and it was kind of like a fun thing to meet everybody, and then you come back to the village where nobody cared.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody, because everybody's got your number in the village. Everybody knows who you are. You're nothing special to anybody, and and you just have your friends, and
Sure.
a lot of my friends were on the show too, and if they weren't, they still, a lot of them did the same kind of thing as I do, and so you're just treated like so most of your life we lived, without it being a big deal at all, and then the film guys were just great guys. They were real outdoorsmen. Some of them were, not in the same sense as outdoorsmen here, but they were, a guy that was with me in the very beginning, for a number of years. He was the guy that they would send out with me, this guy John, and he had been to the top of Everest twice,
Oh,
and
wow.
stuff like that, and he was up there filming a guy parachuting off the top of the mountain the year all those Sherpas died in that avalanche, you know, and that was after he left here, you know, and so you know that's the kind of people that they would send out with us because they couldn't. There were some guys that would stay around the main building where they were doing all the, you know, where they lived. You know, there were some guys that weren't really good outdoorsmen, and they would do like the editing and they, you know, all that sort of stuff. But the people they sent out with us, they were, I call them world-class camera outdoorsmen. They were, you know, they were, they were really good outdoorsmen.
We've got a friend. His name's JJ Kelly. I don't know if you've ever heard of JJ, but he's like I found out about him because he and his buddy kayaked from Alaska to Seattle, like along the years, and they did a documentary on it years ago, and then it was put online, and I saw it, and I found him like I found you. But then years later, him and his buddy rode bikes the whole length of the pipeline just to experience it. So he works in film, and those guys were camera guys on the Deadliest Catch. So they're out on the crab boats, you know, freezing with the dudes. So my point was, he's told me about some of the things that they would do. And it's like, oh man, you guys are as badass as the guys you're filming.
They are. They're some of the stuff I used to do with them. Watching them manipulate those cameras in the cold and their hands. I mean, some of the stuff they had to put up with was, you know, at times worse than what I had to put up with. You know, you know, and it was pretty cool being around them. They were really good guys, a lot of them, and the film company was a real small company from New York, and they would sell the footage to Discovery Channel. See, they weren't a Discovery. It wasn't like we worked with Discovery Channel directly. So, which is different than like a lot of the Discovery shows. A lot of the Discovery shows, they run the filming too, you know, and and that probably had a lot to do with why the show ended too. You know, there were shows that we were doing every bit as good as far as, you know, household viewers and all that sort of stuff as some other shows, but they were Discovery shows. See, this really wasn't a Discovery show. Discovery just bought the footage from this company, but the company we worked for was you know, pretty cool. The guy that ran it, Al Lagarde, he was a really great guy. You know, he was like a father to my son, and you know, and just really good crew. You know, yeah.
I would like to have you on again and just talk more about like a particular topic. You have so many different interesting things to talk about. We've covered all kinds.
Yeah, I enjoy it. Yeah.
I'll send you some of our coffee, because whatever coffee you're drinking is not as good as ours. So you can drink some of our coffee. My buddy runs a company called Armored Coffee.
This is instant coffee.
Yeah, disgusting.
Yeah,
disgusting. Well, I'll send you some Armored Coffee.
When you get me up at 6 a.m. and your normal time of getting up is more like 7:30 or something like that, even that makes a little difference. And so I was, I just did instant, you know. But normally I have a little bit of coffee, but not this morning.
Do you have a coffee? Do you have a coffee grinder?
I do. Yep, I got one of those little.
Okay. I can send you whole beans or ground. Which do you prefer?
Whole beans. Yeah, I'd start grinding.
I'll send you some whole beans. Yeah, we'll send you some whole beans. Hey, so here's how I like to end podcasts. If the people watching or viewing never meet you, never hear your name again, what would you leave them with? If you could leave them with something.
Well, oh man, this is the kind of thing I'm bad at. God, I'm really bad at this kind of thing. If you ask me a question, I can answer questions really well. But that's kind of a question. But well, let's see.
Just what comes to mind, what comes to your heart. Doesn't have to be anything in particular.
Yeah. God, what's that?
If you were to give a young person some advice and you knew it was the only thing you'd ever get to say to them, how about that? Is that a better phrase of phrasing it?
Well, I don't know. Okay, I'll do something like that. I remember something that I do say to young people, and that is that if things ever get really bad, like you're ready to just give up and end it all, that just instead of ending it all in a really bad way, just end it all and go do something else. And that's from my own life. That's from something that I experienced. I was like, when I was in Boston, and you're just wandering around the city and you're just so kind of like lonely and despondent, and you just don't want to keep repeating the same thing that you're going through, and you feel like just the only way to go is just to end it in a real bad way, like just kill yourself or do something so crazy that you probably end up dead, just, and that could be if you're, like doing drugs or you're addicted to something, and which is usually tied down to the way you're living, being so bummed. Just instead of ending it all, just end that all. Just end it. Just leave. Just go someplace else that's what you've maybe thought and dreamed of, like go change your environment, change your job, change what you do, change, whatever, just change it all. Don't, if it's your job and where you're living, just move, get rid of your job, go do something else, go help somebody, go join the Peace Corps, just do something that drastically changes your life instead of ending your life in a negative way, because you always have that option. You might not realize you have that option, but find that option where you can end everything you're doing and find a better way to do things.
I like that a lot. I like the way that, excuse me, you phrased it quite simply. Instead of ending it all, end it all.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we look for answers that I think because stuff seems hard, we assume there's got to be complicated, hard answers. And sometimes it's just that simple. Just go. I always not joke, but you find out somebody's taken their life or done something like you're saying, got themselves into a horrible addiction. I always just think, why not just like take your last $5, man, and go to a beach, go sit on a beach. Of course, you can't be homeless on a beach forever, but like go watch the ocean and the sunset on the water. Like that's a lot cooler than shooting heroin or whatever the hell it is you're doing. Like maybe you start selling coffee on the beach or sunglasses, or I can get a job as suntan lotion boy, 50 cents. I'll apply suntan lotion to hot girls' backs, whatever. I won't get hired a lot, but could try. You guys don't need a lot of, go ahead.
No, you meet a lot of people, that are, homeless and stuff like that used to have incredible jobs and stuff like that, and used to be, and some of them they don't do drugs anymore. They used to be involved in all sorts of negative stuff, and there's a lot of people out there that you wouldn't even think of that are living like you say, just on a beach, that just gave it all up because they weren't happy, and now they're happy, and they're like I say, they're actually straight, and they just gave it all up, and but I gave it all up for a place in the country, and if I lived in the city, I probably would be a homeless person if I had my act together, or something close to that, but out here you can kind of live like that and not be involved in all that stuff, and actually live good, if you're willing to
I
work
love it.
by yourself. Yeah. Yep.
I appreciate your time and sharing with us the ground we covered. I still have a bunch of notes on other things, so maybe I'll reach out to you and see if you want to do this again in the future. We'll keep in touch for sure. And if I'm going to send you some coffee, if there's anything I can do to help you, please let me know. You guys that have not, I'm sorry.
You're an interesting guy. I was looking at some of your stuff, and it's pretty cool. And I like your. I'm not into guns like you are. You definitely
You've got two
know.
rifles. You've got two rifles hanging behind you. I don't have any guns hanging behind me. So
yeah, they're my winter guns, my main winter guns. But yeah, and I got guns all over. I like guns, but I didn't grow up with guns, and all my knowledge from guns is just being out in the woods by myself. Nobody even. I mean, it was years out in the woods before somebody who knew guns like you do showed me how to shoot. And I literally, after one day of somebody showing me how to shoot, how to breathe, and how to, I was like twice the shot from that day on, just from one day, and it's, but yeah, I'm kind of, guns are your life up here, so.
Understood.
Yep.
I appreciate your time and your energy. Those of you that have listened or watched, if you have not wrote down Stan's book, it's called Carry On, and you can get that. I see it on Audible. It's on Amazon. I'm sure it's other places. Carry On, CARRYON, and it's excellent book. Of course, if you have not seen the episodes of Yukon Men, you can do that too. I'm sure they're downloadable or available online all over the place at Discovery Channel. And you're working on something else. You're working on a program called the Stan Project. Did I see that?
Yeah, there's one of the past film guys that used to, again, a different one than who wrote the book, who used to go out with me. He was my main man in the later years, and yeah, he's working. Him and his wife are working on a project. It's more of a documentary of my life. It's more of instead of taking my life and leaving out the parts where I'm laying on a couch or something like that, or in my house drinking coffee. It's it's and glorifying the outdoor stuff and the hunting and trapping and making it look like that's what we do 24 hours a day. This is more of a documentary, and it'll be more of like kind of this podcast, where I'm talking about life and stuff like that. But it'll show some really great footage and how I live and some dog driving and stuff like that. But it's more of a documentary, and it's taking him a long time because him and his wife both work, and he's doing this in his spare time. He has the help of a guy that has made a lot of documentaries and is well known in that field. So he has that guy kind of helping a little bit too. And it's all volunteer stuff. They're not being paid for it. They raised some money in the beginning to make about 4 or 5 trips up to Alaska during all the seasons, so they could show different seasons up here in Alaska. And yeah, hopefully it's well into the editing stage. It should be coming out soon and available.
Very cool.
To be shown. And maybe get it to one of the film festivals, and we'll see. Have no idea what we're going to do with it. But it will be really quality. It'll be much higher quality than probably like the Yukon Men show, because those are made really fast and edited. It'll be a really good quality.
I look forward to seeing it.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time. You guys that have watched or viewed, if you enjoyed it, share it. If you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button. And always tell Drew thank you for his excellent editing work. Stan, I very much appreciate you. Tell your son Joe that and your other friends from town that we appreciate that you guys shared your life with us lower 48ers. And hope you continue to do cool stuff up there and film it and put it out there from time to time.
All right. Well, it was fun, and yeah, maybe we do this again sometime and talk some more.
I bet we will. You guys be well. Don't be dickheads. Visit our website, CarryTrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., CarryTrainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@CarryTrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@CarryTrainer.com or CarryTrainer.com.
I said I got me some gunfighter gun law. Gunfighter gun law, baby. Gunfighter gun law, no more gunfighter blues. Made in the USA, amazing lubricity, 100% synthetic, baby. So it's gonna last you longer. So go on CarryTrainer.com and order yourself some gunfighter gun or gunfighter lube to get rid of your gunfighter blues. I said go on and order yourself some gunfighter